solutions. We hear so much about climate change, increasing catastrophic weather events, rising temperatures, and the declining health of our ecosystems. This is an opportunity to hear Representative Paul Mark and Joan Meschino explain how Massachusetts is taking the lead with a law that was passed this year, a law, not just a bill, this law was passed. And it is referred to as, it seems like to me, it's referred to as both the 2050 roadmap or the pathway to zero.
Hi, I'm Kate Mason, and I am from the Interfaith Council and also All Souls UU. And along with Franklin County continuing the political revolution, we are sponsoring this event today. We are grateful to Dan Tynan and Brett Pitcher for managing the sound system and recording for YouTube. So you can share this on YouTube with your friends who couldn't make it today. The important thing is the goal of decreasing greenhouse gases by 50% by 2050. I'm sorry, by 2030, 100% by 2050. That's huge. This will require collaboration and innovation. But how will it affect me and you?
Friends, I'm Rabbi Andrea Kiner from Temple Israel in Greenfield. And one way that these changes will affect all of us is that we will need to feel closer to the land, closer to the sustainable outputs of the land, more honoring, more aware, and more aligned with the natural order. And in that spirit, we want to acknowledge that we are standing on land and benefiting from land that was seized, expropriated, and stolen from Indigenous peoples. For thousands of years, this has been Pecumtuck land. This is still the homelands of Pecumtuck, Norwadik, Nurwanko, Agwam, Nipmunk, and Abenaki people. These Native peoples and their descendants are still living here among us. And every time we gather, we acknowledge and appreciate that fact.
Thanks, Andrea. We are not alone. We are not alone. And that's important to remember when we have to face this kind of crisis in the world. We are in it together, rich and poor, and red and blue, and black and brown, and tan and white. We're all in this together. We are being called to act together to help meet the great challenge of global warming, of climate change. We need to make rapid transitions. I'll just wait 1 second. 2 seconds. How long does it go on? We are going to need to make rapid transitions from systems that are causing our planet to heat up until it can no longer support living beings like us and our four-footed and winged and finned and leafed family members.
We will have an opportunity for questions and answers after our representatives speak. And we probably won't get to all of your questions, but we want to have answers for you. So if you picked up a file card on the way in, you have a way of writing your question. If you want a file card, raise your hand and somebody can deliver a card so that you can ask a question. And then we will get back to you later. We would like your name and contact information on the file card.
So today we are asking, What can we do? What can you do? What can I do? Because we're setting an incredibly ambitious goal, and not only ambitious, but absolutely necessary. So what do? We need to listen to each other to learn how to accomplish this vital transition. And where do we start? How do we make sure all citizens are involved? And we want to look at issues like retraining of the workforce, equity for lower income communities, and the development of renewable energy. So I just encourage you to stay tuned today and on into the future about this, and stay involved. We are not alone, so stay together. We're not going to do it unless we're all doing it together.
Today, we're so proud to introduce our first speaker, Massachusetts State Representative Paul Mark. Paul is the Vice Chair of the Climate Change Committee, which is also known as TUE, Technology, Utilities, and Energy Committee. Thank you so much for coming today, Representative.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to the rabbi and to the two Kates and to the mayor, Roxanne Wiedegartner of Greenfield, for being here. It's a great honor to share the stage with all of you. And it's really great to see so many people here in the audience on a beautiful Saturday that this is what you choose to do. It's actually refreshing because it means that people here in Greenfield are really passionate about the environment and about clean energy and about preserving our planet for ourselves and for our future. And that's really important. When I first got elected as state representative, in my first term, I asked to serve on the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. I came from a background as a lineman at the phone company, and obviously environmental issues have always been important to me and the people I represent. And they didn't give it to me. So then I asked again in my second term. Nope. Third term. No. Fourth term. No, but I got promoted to chair of redistricting. Fifth term, chair of redistricting again. So in my sixth term, I asked instead, can I stay chair of redistricting? And they said, no, we're going to make you vice chair of telecom. So congratulations. But it's been a really wonderful and exciting assignment, and I'm really glad to have it because it is so important to the work we do. And while I was chair of redistricting, my friend that came to us all the way from the town of Hull, way out on the coast, she asked to meet with me for lunch. Now, I assumed she was going to talk to me about redistricting and I want to get rid of part of Scituate or something like that, which is what people used to like to talk to me about in the last couple of years. And instead, no, she wanted to talk about the bill that is now law that she was shopping around and trying to get buy-in from people that she knew cared about the issue, that she knew would help stand side by side with her and try to fight for it, and that she knew were people that were influential at the time in the legislature. And I found it really refreshing for someone only in their second term to be so involved in the legislative process, to be so aware of how things worked, and to be so committed to a certain bill and a certain priority. And so I'm really honored that Joan chose to come here today from Hull, from the 3rd Plymouth District, over an hour away, to spend time speaking to all of us today about the bill that is now law, that she really was influential in making law, over 2, not 1, 2 vetoes by the governor. The second time in two consecutive sessions, the second time we overrode him and it became law notwithstanding his veto. So please join me in welcoming our guest speaker all the way from Hull, Representative Joan Meschino.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul, for that warm welcome. And thank you, Madam Mayor, for coming down and joining us today. It shows the real commitment that this community already has to our environment. And it speaks volumes to have so many people out today like yourselves joining us. I do want to just pause. Oh, thank you. I am tall. Yes, I'm very tall. As a matter of fact, Zoom is a funny thing, right? It puts us all in the same level playing field. But now that we're out back with our colleagues and with our friends and our residents and constituents, I have gotten more than a few like, oh my goodness, I had no idea you were this tall. It's true. I've always been this way. But I did want to just pause before I began my presentation to really to ask you to thank Paul Mark for his service. He's being very modest, and part of the reason that I wanted to speak with him when I was first shopping this bill around was because he had the foresight to invite leadership to your community. And his conversations and dialogue with the prior speaker and the prior chair of Telecom Utility and Energies was very formative in shaping the Greenworks bill that got filed out of the Speaker's office last session. And that was an important bill because what it said was, if you want good policy, you have to spend the money and invest it. And where the money is spent is what the policy really is. And I just think you are very well represented. We should just give him another round of applause. And he's just a peach of a guy who is very kind to fresh-faced new representatives. So as Paul said, I am Joan Meschino. I'm the rep for 3rd Plymouth District. Those are all coastal communities. And it is open ocean. And my district has been dealing with climate change, sea level rise, coastal storms, coastal surges for decades. And when I was first running and people were starting to ask me about what was the most important issue facing my district, I didn't even have to think about it. Bam, it was climate change. And part of the reason I felt so strongly, not just about working on the resilience pieces and the adaptation, but also the mitigation, is because my district is literally the place where the camera crews go to show you what's happening on those coastal storms. They're depending on which way the wind's blowing, you see the Situate or its hull. And we spend millions of dollars on foreshore protection, and I don't think we should be able to do that unless we work on the underlying causes. And that is what led me to work on the mitigation. These issues present, right? They present as public safety, they present as public health, social justice, environmental justice, racial justice, but the actual solution is economic. Everyone talks about the net zero bill as a climate bill, but it's actually an economic bill. And what we're going to be talking about today is the steps that we're going to take in the plan to decarbonize our economy. And in fact, that's why I filed the 2050 roadmap. I got in, I started talking to people, where was I going to focus, what was I going to file? And what I learned is that we didn't have a plan to achieve our carbon emission goals by 2050. And that's why I filed the net zero bill, and now we have one. So what I thought I would just do, oh, you guys are so sweet. I want you to just come to all my speeches. So what I thought I might just do is to walk you through what the law said, and it was signed into law on March 26, 2001, and the 90 days went, and it is effective and active as of June 26th. So I thought we'd just talk a little bit about that, run through it really high level, talk about what the 2050 roadmap actually is, and the 2030 CECP. Naturally, I'm a legislator, so I'm going to tell you about a little bit about the legislation I'm filing to start to do the work. And then I thought we could talk a little bit about local action. So the 2050 roadmap was the bill that I filed. It's 5 pages long, and what it really does, ooh, wow. All right, we have lobster boats and Coast Guard stations, and this is exciting. So what it really was meant to do was to align with the current science. And that was the resetting of the 2050 roadmap, was the resetting of the carbon emissions. I want to just remind you all that we already made the commitment to decarbonize our economy in 2008. That was the Global Warming Solutions Act. And if you remember back then, we embarked upon a lot of different programs, and the legislature was putting things like the regional greenhouse gas emissions in, cap and trade. And there were a ton of programs, we could list them all off, and they were actually very successful. And in fact, when the numbers come out, and probably sometime at the end of the year, that looks back at 2020, what we expect is that we will have accomplished our original greenhouse gas emission reduction for 2020, which is about 20 million metric tons of carbon out of our atmosphere, which is really exciting to think that greening the grid, all of those strategies really worked. But as I said, we knew that we were behind on the science. We knew that, didn't it feel like it stalled? It felt like everything kind of paused. And that's really what the roadmap bill was about. It was aligning with the current science. It was making the administration do the backcast analysis, which is just to say, what is your schedule of emission reductions and what's the plan to get there? We knew that they were going to be doing this work, and it became very important that we passed this bill very timely because we wanted to make sure that they did it right. And so that was important to have multiple pathways, to do the actual backcast analysis, set strong goals. That's the 2030, 2040 interim goals. We made sure it was a floor, not a ceiling. We made sure it was at least a minimum of a straight line. So if the science told us we need to be more aggressive, we could. And it was the thing that I'm most proud about of the piece of legislation that I wrote was we put in place what I refer to as a people-centric lens. And what I mean by that is we take into account the socioeconomic status, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, and we actually said the words environmental justice. And so everything that the administration now does, they must look at it through this lens to make sure that they're not just passing the buck and pushing down the costs and the burdens of this on the people least able to afford it, but in fact, uplifting and upraising everyone. And that's why you hear a lot of my colleagues talk about workforce development and things like that, and a lot of our colleagues are focused on getting into, say, apartment complexes or environmental justice. And what ended up happening was the 2050 roadmap moved to House Ways and Means early in the process, and it became the vehicle for a much larger bill that we refer to as the next generation climate roadmap. And it brought along with it just tremendous legislation from a lot of our colleagues. And so just to run through some of the things that we were doing, and I heard someone mention it earlier, nature-based solutions, right? That was one of the amendments that got in there, was to account for places like Greenfield, where you have all the forests, and to protect that so that we're honoring not just our environmental resilience, but also using our nature-based solutions. And so it was really, I think it was a very forward-looking bill, and I think it inspired a lot of our colleagues, and the bill that came out included just tons of wonderful things in there, not the least of which was referred to earlier, was a definition of environmental justice and a codification of environmental justice. We have our Rep Dubois and Rep Modero to thank for that language, because it really is the piece that speaks to how we do things and how we hold the system and the process accountable. So that's really kind of the larger framework of the bill, and I will answer any questions you want to do about it. But I do want to mention a couple of other things to you. So when I said the backcast analysis, what they actually did at that point was the administration procured to actually create what is called the 2050 roadmap. It's a very technical document. And you can find it on mass.gov/2050 roadmap, and you can look through it. It is all of the work that we asked them to do. Now, what is incumbent upon us is to take that technical document and what we learned from it, and to start to do the planning for the next 10, 20, 30 years to get us to our goals. And so if you want to go look at it, it's mass.gov/2030 CECP. That is the Clean Energy Climate Plan. It was first published in July. They have now taken it back to align with some of the changes that were in the new law. And you probably, I was hoping would see it by now. You probably won't see it till the spring. But that planning document has been done. And it's based on a lot of the work that the Global Warming Solutions Act had an implementation committee referred to as the IAC, and you can go online and see all of that work too. And they have a lot of working groups. And what those working groups did was they started tackling some of the big sectors. And I don't need to tell you what they are, right? Transportation, 43% of emissions in Massachusetts, and housing, how we heat homes and buildings, which is another 36%. And so now those committees have been doing a lot of work, and a lot of the groups that we all belong to, Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society, ELM, Sierra Club, all participate there and have been actively working on sort of the core policies. So now that we have our statewide framework, now we have to jump to the actual work of it. Yes, thank you. And we cannot let the administration just rest on its laurels. We actually need to make them do things. And that's part of the transparency, the iterative process that we built into it, so that there's more public input into this. And then there'll be more accountability out to you as residents, but also to us as legislators, so that we can put in place some of the next big pieces of legislation. And I'm going to talk about a few of them. Obviously, they're mine, but in general, the space where I think we should be focused on. But in the meantime, I just want to mention a couple of things to you. First and foremost, budget. So, as I said before, where you spend your money is what your real policies are. And I think the legislature should be really proud that we passed a budget that included a 6.5% increase over the governor's budget on the green budget line items. And I can share some numbers with you, but it's not just in EEA for this work, it's across the board for all of the agencies, right? DEP, DCR, coastal zone, well, you probably don't care about coastal zone management, but we do in our district, and all of those places. And so I always work closely with DER about ecological restoration and removing dams. All of those budget line items were increased in the aggregate 6.5%. And we've got a long way to go on that. And I mention it because those are budget advocacy things that will start coming up again in the spring. And we need all of your help in the building so that when we're advancing our amendments on these things, that we have your support on those things. And we'll be coming up on that budget cycle soon. You'll see the consensus revenue hearings starting in December, and then the budget will come out in January, and then the House will take up that work. I also wanted to mention that there's been a series of hearings, and I'm sure the rep has been talking about this, the ARPA money from the federal government. And the part of the reason I mentioned that is because the House of Representatives it was initiated under Speaker DeLeo and has continued under Speaker Mariano, had been doing a listening session on what strategies might we do and what would we use that money for to make sure that we're investing in the green economy, the green sector, as part of our overall economic recovery. And for those of you who are interested, if you go to malegislature.gov, you can see the schedule on there. We already had the big hearing on how we might spend the ARPA money for the environment and for energy and the climate. It was very interesting. And I would just encourage you to follow some of the organizations that spoke there, because they are really working on, and in one of the packet that you gave me, I saw shovel-ready projects. I think it should be shovel-worthy projects. I don't think we should be reinvesting in carbon-based infrastructure just because we have money. That will make our job so much harder. We should be looking forward, and we should be thinking about how we do that. And in fact, I can't speak for the Senate side of things, but I can speak for the House side. And in fact, there are a lot of us that are looking forward and thinking about things like workforce development and projects and investments in things that we might do. So that's another piece where you guys really should keep your eye on it and work closely to support Rep. Mark's work in the State House on these topics. The other thing I wanted to just sort of talk a little bit about was legislation. So I've said a couple of times, now we need to jump to the work of it. I'm not kidding. Everyone was like, all right, you got the roadmap bill passed. What is next? I'll tell you what's next. We have to tackle transportation, 43%, right? So what I've done is I filed a series of bills, and self-serving, I apologize, but I'll be shameless about it, to tackle some of these things. But there are really some really great legislation, and a lot of our colleagues are focused in on electrification. One of the things that I'm very proud of is we are now talking about, and as a committee member, not will we or won't we pass a climate bill, but how are we going to shape the climate bill this year? That, my friends, right there, that we are thinking about what will this year's bill or this session's bill be, is like, it just leaps and bounds over when I came in, whether it was more of like, will we or won't we? Now it is, what is it and how will we shape it? And the Speaker of the House, Speaker Mariano, has been really great, and he has embraced wind. One of our colleagues, Dylan Fernandez, filed a bill that's really about what are the investments we need to make sure that offshore wind projects succeed, that we're investing in them the right way. That includes things like workforce development. And what a lot of us are hoping, and what I am individually advocating for, is that with that wind legislation also comes grid modification. Those are the investments. It's not sexy stuff, but you have to be practical and pragmatic, and you have to do things like that. We are also hoping that there will be a series of bills around electrification, and that was really what I wanted to mention to you today, because electrification really is electrification of transit and electrification of how we heat our homes. And I just wanted to direct your attention to a few bills on zero emission vehicles. It's House 3541, House 3255, and House 3347. And what it is it's a series of bills that it's a mandate. We're proposing that we will not actually register any internal combustion engines after 2035. This is aligning with all of the industry, with California, with New York. And why it's important is because it sends a strong message to our partners in industry. And what it does is it leads to the investments, and that's the other bill that I have, which is what investments do we need to make. So it would have been really nice to know that as I was coming out on Mass Pike or Route 2, that there were charging stations along the way should I need them. But it's even more than that. It's being ready, right? And thinking now about what you're building and how you're EV ready. And if you're living in, say, an apartment building, how do you avail yourselves of these things? And so it's those investments, but it's also making it more accessible to us, like point of sale rebates instead of, it's not just wealthy people that can buy Teslas, like it's the regular people like us that can actually buy those vehicles and start to make those transitions. And it's also looking ahead at all of our public fleets and fleets that serve a public purpose. Think your school buses, right? So instead of having your kids standing there, yes, getting his daily dose of particulate matter and probably encouraging his asthma, now you know that you're contributing to the larger carbon emission reduction. It has a positive public health benefit. And honestly, I will just say again, I never argue the point about climate change. I don't need to. There are so many co-benefits in this. I think we should be thinking about how we bring everybody to the table and understanding what they're interested in, what they need, and what they're going to support us on, and not just fighting about the rest of it. So it's really, I loved the remarks at the beginning to do that. The other two bills I wanted to just mention to you, there's a lot of us that have filed bills in the space of how we heat our energy. I'm going to mention mine, which is House 3350, but I have colleagues. I think it's Rep. Blay. Rep. Govea, Rep. Robinson, Rep. Khan, Rep. Vitolo, have all filed bills in these spaces. Mine is a more comprehensive one, and it's important to communities like yours that are green communities, where you can have, it's Green Communities Plus. It's helping get your municipal light plants on board and aligned with the same thing. So these are comprehensive bills, and I encourage you to take a look at them. And we're always happy to give you fact sheets and talk more in detail and depth about that. The last bill that I just want to mention is called an Access to Justice. I think of this as an environmental justice bill, but it's everything. And what it really says is that if government has put a policy in place that is benign on its front, it's for a good reason, but it has a disparate impact, which is to say it discriminates against a protected class, right? We all have our civil rights and it's part of our protected classes. Then you would have standing as a Mass resident in a Mass court to make that argument. So you don't have to, and it's really meant in our district to fight off the compressor station in Weymouth, which I should thank you all because it's all of your groups that support us in that advocacy. But we think of it as an environmental justice piece. And what it really is, it says these laws are in place now and you can take action to make sure that they are implemented and you don't have to wait for an NGO to do it for you. Yeah, it's huge. It's really huge. So the question I always get, and this is how I'll transition it back to Rep. Mark, is what is next? What about the municipalities? So most of these bills are about high state level, statewide policies and frameworks. But the way that we traditionally do is we create incentive programs, and I'm sure you had a great process with the mayor for your vulnerability assessment MVP. And what that does is when you start doing these things, it leads to grants. And what it is we've proposed is to sort of blow out the green communities, like a Green Communities Plus, to really start to make available to the mayor and to the city councilors and to the community money for projects. That you can really start to do the work. I should have looked up to see how much you've already availed yourself of, but it's really trying to incentivize and get municipalities to a place where they really can start the work of it. We've started to infuse this into our state building programs, think libraries, think schools, right? So that we will really be trying to help our municipalities make those choices while we're in this transition phase so that municipalities can lead on these things. One of the biggest things is the building codes, right? That we are proposing to make them mandatory. Right now they're opt-in, but we have pushed BBRS to start to develop them. And that once you make those community-wide investments, everything else flows from there because what the municipality does is what the business community does. But at the end of the day, it's about local action. And so I am not concerned about Greenfield at all because you have wonderful representatives at the state level, you have a fantastic mayor, and I have all of you who are making those commitments to think about these things, to try to figure out projects and strategies that make sense for you, right? In Hull, we're doing 100% renewable committee because we have a municipal light plant. In Hingham, town meeting voted to make the whole municipality net zero. In Cohasset, they are doing community aggregation, and it's responsive both to their context, to their needs, to their talents and abilities. And I am only too delighted to hear more about what your community is doing and thinking about the ways that I can, as a state representative, support my colleague, Paul Mark, in advancing all of your interests in the green communities. And as I look out in this particular venue, I see the inspiration, I hear your leadership, and I have no doubts that Greenfield will be a wonderful leader in this space. And I just thank you so much for inviting me here. It's like such a pleasure to be with all of you today.
I think they wanted me to say a couple of them, right. and then yeah. Well, thank you very much, Representative. Well, this thing got higher. Thank you for that very informative talk and for all that detail. It's really great. Again, we really appreciate you coming out, and I know you're going to stay for the questions and everything, but I still want to express my appreciation yet again. They asked me now to talk for a little bit, not too long, because we do want to get plenty of time in for questions and answers and that kind of thing, to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that are available for funding. And so when Rep. Joan was talking about some of the promise of the potential infrastructure bill and of the ARPA bill, we look at some of the projects. She talked about electrification. And so the idea, in theory, with this infrastructure bill that we've been waiting to come out of Washington, if we get it, if we actually get a crack at it and get the chance to try to mark it up and process it here at the state level, we look at roadblocks that exist that are once in a generation that maybe people don't realize are in the way of some of these climate priorities we're trying to accomplish. And so a great example would be right here at the FRTA, the bus garage. So people have asked me, like, why doesn't the FRTA have electric buses? Because the garage is run down. The garage doesn't have the capacity for the infrastructure to allow the buses to charge, and it can't have it in the location where it is. The bus garage wouldn't be able to keep these higher capacity, better vehicles, modern vehicles, adequately protected when they need it, especially in the winter. And so we were able to get, in a bond bill for transportation, $15 million to try to replace that bus garage. Thank you. And that's the whole Franklin County delegation. And with this infrastructure money, now we're looking at the potential to actually have it come here and have it come to fruition. Because sometimes we get these bonds and it takes a while, and they end up projects like the courthouse, projects like the parking garage, projects like the Valley Flyer that went through. But this infrastructure money, potentially billions of dollars coming into this state, has the potential to try to help us, as does the ARPA money that we have right now before us. Some of it's flowing directly to the city, some of it's flowing directly to the governor, and then there's about $4 billion that we're going to have a chance to mark up in the legislative process. And so I've heard plenty from so many of you, but this is a time to make thoughts available to those of us in the legislature. If you can think of bigger term, longer term, higher dollar projects that we should be trying to fight for and try to steer those resources to. We were able in the past state budget to put $13 million for the first time for offshore wind development training programs. Now, those training programs could come to places right here like Greenfield Community College. They can go through various labor unions or various other spots, but it's getting that money out there now so that when we have this offshore wind project that we're hoping to do, that we're getting approval for, that's about to get done off the coast, that the people that are needed to fill these jobs and make all of this a reality are going to have the funding. We're going to have the way to steer them through that. And it's important because those jobs are renewable. What does that mean? They're jobs in the renewable sector, but they're jobs that are going to be sustainable, that they're going to last, that we want more of these projects to come. We want to train someone now that's going to be able to keep doing this, is going to be able to keep doing this in our community. That's the point of stimulus bills, is to benefit our community in the short term and the longer run. And so we do that. We look for these opportunities in the budget. Joan also mentioned a bill that actually came out of the minds of the people of Greenfield. So we started off with a green bank bill. And we had that idea as a way for a public funding source for renewable energy projects and green jobs. And so when you go to a normal bank, there's certain metrics that need to be met. With a green bank, they're still going to look to make a profit and be successful, but it would be a bank that is based on the idea that our metrics are based on how do we get funding into these renewable projects immediately? How do we solve climate change as quickly as possible with local initiatives and, again, creating local jobs? Talking about that, I brought Speaker DeLeo personally out here, and he came to a chamber breakfast, and I think 200 of you showed up wearing buttons about solar and net metering and all of this stuff. I see Claire waving in the back, and it made an impression on him. Then we brought the former chair of the telecom committee, Tom Golden, out here, and he rode the little trolley with Nancy and Pam and a bunch of people, and it has an impact. That's part of the legislative process, is bringing these people in a higher position out here firsthand to learn and listen. They stole my idea and they turned it into the Green Works bill, which means they stole your idea and they turned it into the Green Works bill. So the House passed it, and that's something that's coming back as it has a new name, the Green Futures Bill this session that I'm now a co-sponsor of, even in spite of my leadership position on the committee. I still co-sponsored it. And with the infrastructure bill, again, there's this opportunity to get $100 million out here, with 10% dedicated to rural communities in the short term over the next 10 years. And again, having that impact as quickly as possible. A couple of things I want to just mention before the telecom committee. Now, we spent a lot of time in the first 6-7 months of this session working on offshore wind. It has been a priority of the speaker. It has been a priority to get that licensing and now to get these structures up and running as quickly as possible. So we've had hearings on offshore wind. We had the component that fit into the budget that I already talked about. Biomass. How many people out here like biomass? Yeah! Right. So anti-biomass. So the Department of Energy is trying to issue new regulations. As a funny little consequence of the way the law is written, the Telecom Committee had the chance to listen to presentations on biomass energy and on solar energy and offer some kind of commentary and feedback. Now, they don't have to listen to anything we said, but it was a chance for a number of people and a number of groups from around the state to get that feedback and make it very clear to the people over in the Baker administration that this isn't something we're looking for. We're not looking for large-scale biomass. We're not looking for that to come out anywhere, not in Berkshire, Franklin, Hampshire County, not out in Western Massachusetts, because you think we're small towns and we're not going to notice this is happening. And we've been trying to protect the environmental justice communities like Springfield. And I think it's having an impact, and all the commentary that people have made is having an impact. Thank you. We had a hearing on biomass bills as well recently and on expanding the bottle bill. And then we'll have all the other policy matters that come before our committee. We'll have the opportunity to listen to it through hearings from now all the way through February or March. And the great thing that's happened, COVID hasn't been a great thing for a lot of people, but a good silver lining is the ability to testify and participate in these committees remotely. So now instead of driving 4 hours, 5 hours round trip to Boston, anyone here, you can sign up. You might still have to wait hours to get your name called, but you can do it from your living room or you can do it from your workplace, and you can do it by Zoom or by Teams or whatever method we happen to be using at the time. If you have the internet, which I don't in Peru, but you can drive to a place and try to get that. So it's a good moment right now. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot that already exists on the books, thanks to representatives like Joan. And there's a lot more we can do. And she mentioned another really important point. We pass laws. There's multiple branches of government. The laws we pass sometimes are vaguer than we would like because that's a consequence of how we get them to pass a body of 160 members and 40 members in the Senate. And then the administration, the governor's administration, has the ability to carry those laws out, to execute them. How they choose to execute these things has an impact. Who our governor is has an impact. Next year is an election year for governor. If this governor is running again, then push him. If he wants to run and he wants to win again, push him to doing the right things, to putting these things into place as quickly as is possible, because that's what the people of this state overwhelmingly demand, not just our region, the entire state. And if he's not willing to do it, exactly. I'm glad you said it. Every 4 years, we have an opportunity to try to change that leadership. So take advantage of it. The people that are going to run want to be before you, want to talk to you, and want to hear from you. So thank you again for having me here, and I'll turn it back to our wonderful tri-hosts who will, I think, facilitate the question and answers. Thank you.
We have some questions coming forward.
There's a microphone down there. Okay, there are a lot of great questions, and I know there are more coming in, and they're on a wide variety of topics. So we've tried to group a few together. So there are several questions having to do with forests. How will we protect farms and forests from the greedy power company? What about subsidizing deforestation for solar arrays? And more. So the general topic is forest deforestation, carbon sinks.
Wow, what an amazing question, and an important question. So one of the things I alluded to sort of quickly in my remarks was about how we use natural lands and nature-based solutions. And one of the really important things, and of course, I always chide myself because I wasn't smart enough to include it, but it was an amendment that I supported tremendously that came from the Nature Conservancy. And it said that we will rely upon carbon sinks, natural carbon sinks, and it gave a definition of nature-based solutions. And the reason I mention it again is to that very important question is that that policy piece is going to give us a reason to have a thoughtful conversation about things like where we put solar and when we're going to preserve and protect forests and why we're going to have, remove dams and things like that. And these are a lot of initiatives that have already been in place. But I think what was important about what the Nature Conservancy was really advocating for, and this idea, it came from the minority leader, Rep. Jones. What I think what was really important about it is it now gives us a framework and a way to talk about why we might invest in agriculture, right? Sustainable agriculture, and how we might make those investments, and why we might choose to make certain policy pieces. And there are actually a series of bills that I'm not going to remember off the top of my head that are before the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources right now. So it's a great question. I can't answer it specifically right now, but we can certainly do a little research on our staff and respond back to our leaders so that you can take a look, because that conversation is being had right now. We now have a framework within which to make those kinds of decisions, and your advocacy on those things to protect your natural resources and our farmlands, and to do it in a sustainable way. And also, I mean, it also ties into a lot of the problems we're having around hunger and food insecurity, and how we have sustainable farming, and it goes from farm to table, and how we take that and make it available for SNAP benefits and things like that. So fantastic question, good framework right there, but we can do a little bit more research and certainly get back. I don't know if the rep has any better intel on it than I do.
No, that's all really really well said and well explained. I'll just add there are a couple of bills to ban logging on public lands that are coming out of the Western Mass delegation, and hopefully we'll have a chance in the not too distant future to try to vote in favor of those on NRA.
So this is maybe a follow-up to this, because Joan, you talked about solar and where to put it. So there's a question, we know how many square feet of solar panels we need, but I have not yet seen regulations about where solar can be installed and where it cannot be installed. And so the question is, do you see a need for regulations? And if so, how can we get there?
So yes, I really do think we do need some better regulations on this. And one of the things that Rep. Paul referred to was actually the administration is changing how they're doing the solar rec program right now. And in some respects, they're trying to grow with it and adapt to where we are in terms of our marketplace, but they're also killing the old program, which leaves a lot of people hanging. And I think one of the big pieces is that whatever we decide to do with it, and however we keep our eye on that, the regulations that they develop, I think the real mistake that the administration has made is that we need to know we can rely on it and that they can't change it midstream. The point is to send out regulations so we all know how to participate and what's going to be expected, so that we can actually make the commitment. We can do the cost benefit analysis if we're an individual or if we're a company. But there are some laws that need to be put in place and some regulations, and including some that are before our committee, that look at behind the metering and how we do some of these things, because it really does speak to the grid modification bill that's in front of us, and that I'm hoping that the committee will advance this session, because we need to be putting all of that infrastructure in place first. I know it's not sexy stuff to talk about, but if you don't have those investments, and I think very much about what is foundational, what is incremental, and what can we build upon. And I think that's where we're at right now, but not for nothing. We just need the administration to be consistent. Rep?
In Greenfield, solar is sexy.
Yeah.
I thought they would get applause. What the hell? No, I just add a bill that I file is actually would require every public building being built to have solar placement on its roof. And what a simple idea that as we build new projects, let's make sure we're taking advantage of sun-facing rooftops and make our state-owned buildings more cost-effective. Two birds in one stone.
So switching topics just a little bit, we had a couple of questions having to do with the Northfield Mountain pumped storage. And can the legislature act to protect the Connecticut River from the pumped storage? It's not environmentally sound. It's destroying the river and its denizens, and it costs more energy than it makes. And it's pending a 50-year review, a 50-year decision. So this is really a key moment. And so we're wondering if the legislature is tackling this or other advice you might have.
It's not a state legislative issue. The issue, the licensing, is before FERC, the Federal Environmental Regulatory Commission. And we know them. They're our great friends from the pipeline fight, right? They do a great job. They never met a pipeline they didn't want to approve. So with FERC, there's time for public comment. What we were able to do at the state level is to get the funding to make sure that there was someone from Franklin County that is able, and with DEP, to serve as an intervener in the process and to be on top of it, advocating for the local communities, for the local river, for the local people. A bonus that I'm going to talk about, it hasn't happened yet, but I feel pretty good about. One of our colleagues, Representative Maria Robinson, who is an environmental champion from Framingham, has been appointed by President Biden to FERC. Now, she hasn't been confirmed yet. And what's his name? Mnuchin, the guy from West Virginia, Manchin, who's always trying to hold stuff up, has been trying to hold her up, but I think she's going to get the green light. And so in some good news, we're going to have the cell phone number of one of the 5 commissioners for the first time in my career. And I plan on taking advantage of it. So
How about Manchin's cell phone number?
If I can get it, I will share it with all of you.
Okay, let's move on to transportation. So there are a couple of questions here. One, why are transportation emissions so much in Massachusetts? Joan mentioned 43% versus the country as a whole, we think 25%. And can we deal with some of it by reducing gridlock or the amount of transport of goods? And somebody else asked, we know that all cars sold must be electric vehicles by 2035. Is there a similar directive about lawn equipment, which is hugely polluting?
All right, I don't know who asked about lawn equipment, but I love you. And I'll file that next session. So I don't know that I never did actually ask why it's so much here in Massachusetts, and there could be a lot of reasons why it's a higher percentage for our particular state. I mean, it's not like we're down, it's not like we have a lot of, say, oil refineries or or big industrial spaces here. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why ours is as a higher percentage, but I know it is. And so I feel that there's real great urgency in tackling this, because it is the highest percentage, but it's also a piece that we can act on really quickly. We all buy cars, 3, 4, 5 years, and then we're trading them up. And so there's real opportunity. And that's the bills that we filed, were really to send the message to the industry. And that's honestly, I feel like they're already sort of transitioning in that direction anyway. But it's about making it more accessible to everybody. So if you have a point of sale, retail, and you actually can go in there and you can avail yourself of it at that time to lower the cost, you don't have to wait for it to be refunded. Those are real time things that we can be doing that can really open it up to people to start making those changes. And so the bill itself is really about those investments because it is the highest piece left for us to tackle, and it presents the most opportunity. We could take a look at why it's like what other states look like, but my guess is that within our region, it's probably pretty consistent. Relative to other parts of the country, it might not be. I will just say the other thing is that Rep. Steve Owens has a bill about electrifying the MBTA. Yes, I mean, I think one of our big investments needs to be, and that's the Fair Share Amendment and different other initiatives, and we'll see federal dollars coming like in a tranche for transportation. But I feel like one of the other big things that we need to tackle is not just transitioning our public transit over, but making sure we're really investing in it so that it runs effectively, runs efficiently, and it goes where we need it to be, and that we can really start driving people towards not just electric cars, right? Because then that's still a traffic problem, but pushing people towards a reliable, affordable public transit system. And that includes the RTAs that you have out here, right? So in where I live, that's about the MBTA, which is just our big regional RTA. It's also about making sure we're funding all of the other RTAs across the state. And there's been some work that we did last session that increased some of the funding there as well. I don't know if you'd like to add anything that's more specific to your region, Paul.
No, I'll co-file the lawn equipment bill with you.
Yeah, seriously, brilliant.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So thanks for mentioning the Fair Share Amendment. So for people who don't know, that's going to put a tax on income over $1 million with the funding to go to education and transportation. There's a table in the back where people can fill out postcards so that you'll get reminded about when and how to vote on that. So I'd urge people to check that out.
And just really quickly, that is going to be a ballot initiative. So the legislature has advanced it to be a ballot initiative. So you actually get to vote on that.
November 2022.
Yes.
But it's not too early to start talking to all your friends and neighbors about it.
And remember, the first $20,000 a week you make, you pay the normal rate. Over that, you start paying more. 20,000 a week. The first 20,000 a week. So once you get to $1,000,001, you start paying the higher rate. But when people say it like that, $1 million, it seems like out of reach, right? I don't make $20,000 a week, so I mean, I don't come close to that. I'm lucky if I make 1,000 a week.
For everybody who's been saying tax the rich, this is the opportunity.
Right.
So a question about regional school districts, and it's specific about Mohawk, but I think it's more generalizable. So this is a Western Mass question. How can Mohawk or other regional school towns combine grant money to improve energy in school buildings? For example, Coleraine will not fund work without participation by other towns. So we need some way of coordinating and centralizing and creating a cooperative structure for that.
Yes, this is very specific, and I've actually had some emails about this. So I'm happy to work with whoever on trying to get regional.
Peter Brooks.
Yeah, Peter. I've had emails from you, but part of the question is also that select board seems to want to do something else, which can be a problem. So I'm happy to talk that one-on-one anytime.
Good question. Could the rebate for electric cars be extended to pre-owned vehicles? This would substantially reduce the cost. Right now, there's a tremendous incentive for people to buy new cars when we'd like to be recycling used cars.
Brilliant. I will make note of that. I have my pen and my paper here. Brilliant.
Okay. With electrification, would anyone consider burying transmission lines underground to save the cost of repair from storms?
Yeah, as a former lineman, that's not a bad idea. That there are still repair work. There is still repair work that needs to be done, but it's totally different. So I guess we could try to mandate it, but I don't. Yeah.
Doesn't always work everywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. It seems like if it was, yeah, where feasible, the companies should be doing that. If it's going to save them money, it's a no-brainer. Right, right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I don't know about it being a directive from the legislature.
Okay, we still have a lot of good questions here. Do you think Massachusetts can achieve our goal of reducing climate change emissions to zero without doing what California is doing? California requires large carbon emitters and utilities to report on their climate emissions annually and demonstrate that they're reducing emissions by 3% each year or else pay a fine.
So they got that from us. So first of all, I did just want to say we can absolutely achieve net zero by 2050. I have no doubt in my mind. And when we picked the schedule of emission reductions, so 50% by 2030, we actually picked we were looking at, and I'm the author. I drafted this. I'm the one that picked 50%. And we were talking about whether it should be a range, 45 to 55, whether it should be something we felt was, more achievable, so we would be buoyed by our own success. We actually chose the 50% because we wanted to drive innovation. That's the whole point of this bill, is to not just, it's to align behind science. It's to get everybody in the state at the local, municipal, state, and hopefully the federal level, the business communities. It's to align all of our activities, but it's to drive innovation. That's what the difference between 45 and 50% is. It's not easy. It's hard. It's work. And it's to drive the innovation. And we have a knowledge-based economy here, and we want to be keeping and retaining all of that talent and brain power here. So for my part, we absolutely can be doing that. Part of the original Global Warming Solutions Act included the regional greenhouse gas emissions program, which is cap and trade. And so what part of the reporting is that top 298 emitters in the state, and I don't know how they picked that number, but the top 298 emitters actually are registered. They have to report, and when we're not meeting our goals, you have to actually pay into the APS, stands for Alternative Portfolio. I can never remember. APS, but you pay into a fund, and that is the fund where all the money for the Green Communities Acts come from. And they take that money and they invest it back into the municipalities. The other thing I'll just say too is that when the governor is talking about TCI, and I know that's controversial, I don't know how your community feels about it, the Transportation Climate Initiative, what he's talking about is cap and invest, where he's going to take the money on all of what he's proposing. And it's a regional compact that they're trying to still put together. And it was initiated under the Patrick administration, but the Baker administration has really pushed it forward as far as anyone's ever gotten it, and is looking like it will be a reality. But that's cap and invest. And to your earlier remarks and questions about where money comes from, it's also from that. So we actually already do the kind of reporting that you're calling for, and it's what you think, right? Power plants, but you'd be surprised, universities, hospitals, you'd be surprised who some of the people are that are paying into it. And it's meant to drive what I said, innovation. So, yeah, did you want to add?
So I'm going to throw in a question of mine, and it has to do with the federal money, the ARPA money that you mentioned before. If you could say a little bit more about what the process is going to look like and how we can intervene. And specifically, I know that at UMass, the unions and the administration have come together around a carbon mitigation plan that's quite ambitious and could really use some of that money.
Mm-hmm. So what they're telling us is the way the ARPA money is going to work is similar to our budget process. And so the way the budget process works is the Ways and Means Committee on the House and Senate side both put out initial versions. we as individual legislators have a chance to look that over, offer amendments. Our amendments often come in the form of either big picture things that many of us join together on, or regional, city-based, smaller earmarks that we file amendments for. And then we get together, and for the budget, it's a week in April, and in the Senate's a week in May, and we hash it all out, we debate it all, and then it goes to the other chamber and back and forth. So we're anticipating that's what it's going to look like. We're being told we're going to have an opportunity at like $4 billion, which is good, which is like 10% of a budget for the normal fiscal year. So that's a good chunk of money to spend effectively. And I'd say now is the time, as it has been for the last couple of weeks and months, if people know of priorities, either in the bigger picture, like UMass, something that regionally based people, other legislators can join on, or even statewide initiatives, let us know. But if anyone has ideas for something that is specific to one of the communities any of us represent, also, this is a good time to let us know as soon as possible is what I would recommend. Definitely, I think this will be done before this calendar year at the latest. So.
The other thing I would just mention is someone asked a question about regional school district. I think it's always makes a stronger argument for things that are regional projects as well. So don't overlook the regional opportunities and the regional initiatives and the regional projects that you have as well.
Okay. Hello? Lots of our towns have municipal light plants that were needed originally for broadband. How can we use these for clean energy?
I think I know who asked this question. We had this talk already. But so a potential use of some of the money or some of the ways to use the broadband, the MLPs for renewable energy could be something as simple as how you power the central office-like facilities that are generating the internet service for a community. And so without getting really boring, because I used to be a lineman and all that stuff, you could put solar at these facilities and use it to draw power that then became the base power, because the phone company uses batteries that they take alternating current out of the grid and turn it into direct current that goes out over the system. You could do that through solar. You could take advantage of doing something like this at the local level. And then if every community were to do that, yeah, it would make an impact in how much energy is used, how much energy is produced locally, and how much energy doesn't come from this larger grid, but is sourced through a town or city-based authority. And then from there, if that was successful, then you have the potential to grow and undertake different projects based on the savings you're making and based on the successful track record. So I think it's a good time, if a community is looking for that, to start thinking about it and to start having conversations about what they would be interested in really pursuing.
So I'll just add, I hope you are proud of your municipal light plants. As part of the original bill that I filed, the 2050 roadmap, basically said municipal light plants had previously been exempt and they would be a regulated entity for the purposes of achieving our greenhouse gas emissions. And to their credit, the municipal light plants all came together through MWIC and through ENE and actually crafted a piece of legislation very specific. So now all of your municipal light plants have adopted through state law and are now regulated for their own clean energy standard, which mirrors the current one that we just adopted for the state for the net zero. So I just want to say kudos to the municipal light plants, because they have already achieved in the aggregate more than 50% renewable power procurement and generation. And they have made the commitment where they weren't previously regulated. Now they have stepped forward in a leadership role for the state, and they're doing some really cool, interesting projects some of them regionally, some of them individually. But I just wanted to say, I know there's a lot of them out here. I have 2 in my district, and I just wanted to say kudos to your MLPs and to their managers and to their light board commissioners.
Okay, I'm getting down to the questions that are a little bit hard to read or a little bit technical, but I'll do my best. So the law is great, but what are the regulations and policies to make sure that poor communities get EV charging stations and that we increase the use of electric buses?
So that is an excellent question. And part of what is built into the law, I mentioned, is the people-centric lens. And that is what requires the administration to look at the cost, benefit analysis, and to make sure that the investments are benefiting communities of color, communities in poverty, environmental justice communities, and to really make sure that that we are really uplifting everybody. That being said, we also have filed the bill that I referred to, and I never know the numbers, but the bill that I referred to about the investment in EV infrastructure actually speaks to that, as does the Green Communities Act. I call it Green Communities Act Plus, that's in the decarbonization bill. And there are actually a lot of bills filed in this space really to address that exact question, because it's going to be incredibly important that we bring everybody along and that everybody is able to avail themselves of it, particularly if you're an environmental justice community that really has been, bearing the burden of it. Those are the communities that we should really be figuring out the investments in, and to make sure, if you're, just because you're renting, you should still be able to have the benefits of a charging station. You should still be able to have the most efficient appliances, air source heat pumps, all of these things. So it's very much, the planning is very much focused on it. And now a lot of the legislation that you'll see come out this, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be working on it this session, will address that exact question.
Okay, I'm going to combine 2 questions here about solar. And Claire, I hope I get this right. The first is, we need a fix for the donut hole in solar policy, which left out 25 to 60 kilowatts. Behind the meter solar PV systems exempt from net metering caps. And the Senate Bill 2169 addresses the donut hole, but we also need storage incentives as well. So how to push the Baker administration to accelerate action in those areas? And a related question, it's very short, is I understand that Green Communities grants do not fund solar development, at least this year. Why?
I don't know the answer to the second question, but there is legislation. I will just say that it took the legislature a little bit last session to figure out how to function in the middle of the pandemic. And I think one of the positives was that we figured it out. It's been very effective. And once we got used to it and got going, because some of us are old dogs and need to learn new tricks, we really were able to avail ourselves of it. And I think you saw us focus very much on the pandemic and a lot of the laws that needed to be put in place, both for public health and public safety and for voting, et cetera. The flip side to that, so the downside to that, was a lot of the legislation that people were kind of excited and interested about didn't quite make it to the end. And I am personally grateful to Speaker DeLeo for really sticking with his commitment to pass the 2050 roadmap. It was like literally the last day of formal session, and then it worked through the committee process, and we literally passed it the last day of, not just for the House, but for everything. So some of these bills have been pending a little while, but there is legislation, and I don't know where they stand, and we can definitely report back to see whose bills they are, so you can track them. I hope everyone knows you can go to malegislature.gov, look at the top for the star, you can create an account, and then you can say what you're interested in, so you'll know when bills like this will be coming up for hearings. and they're going to be coming out soon. So, so I would just encourage everyone to look there. And I'm sorry I don't have an answer specific to that particular question, but I do know that there are bills out there. So I can see my husband in the back is melting a little bit in the heat. So maybe can we have like a wrap-up question and maybe some closing remarks from the rep?
Okay, Pam's going to do the wrap-up question.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your coming and appreciate your answering the questions. And I think there's one major question, one whole area of work that hasn't been dealt with at all. And that's workforce development. Like, how are we going to get electricians that take 4 years to train working? And I would like Andrew Baker, who does workforce development, to come up and ask that question.
Is it going to sound like the way you just asked it, or different?
No, it's going to sound different.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Paul. No, my question is going to the remarks you made, and what specific aspects of Net Zero Act or other legislation you're filing will stimulate the kinds of green economic activity in Western Massachusetts that will create green jobs, and hence the need for green job training? And my follow-up is, what kind of jobs do you envision?
Good, you Bill first.
So one of our colleagues, Marjorie Decker from Cambridge, actually was the one that included in the net zero bill and the larger next generation climate bill, the initial workforce development language. Really was very elegantly done. And what we've seen is investments in things like community colleges, universities, labor councils to really do the kind of training, and we have ongoing conversations at both the committee level as well as at the highest levels with leadership and with the governor's office about business development and what workforce that are existing and our future business needs and industry needs have. So those conversations are all happening right now. And the speaker spent some time down in Fall River, right? Is it Fall River? Or New Bedford, maybe it's New Bedford, the port, having these exact conversations and going on site that are really saying, all right, if we are really going to build all, 5,600 megawatts of wind, what do I need both for the building, for the receiving the materials, the shipping, all of the initial laying of the electric, all of the grid mod. I mean, when you think about all the things we just said, people are going to need, I'm going to need a local electrician to put the battery charger on my house and to install, to install the solar panels. So when you really think about the activities that we're going to be doing, that's the jobs. Those are the jobs. And I will say that the Global Warming Solutions Act, one of the pieces of research we did initially was what was the economic positive effect. It was 110,000 green jobs, many of which we lost during the downturn of the economy recently, but that's why everyone understands that those investments need to be made there, because it is an economic bill. And we do have the ability, both from incubators and innovation centers like Greenworks, is that what it's called? Over in Cambridge. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of it because they're all tied together. But there's actually, those are just some examples. Now, what that would mean for Western Mass, I will turn it over, but I will say that a number of our colleagues have filed bills specifically on investments in universities and community colleges, and all of those training pieces, but also thinking about workforce housing, right? And being able to afford to stay here. I mean, that's a big theme along a lot of our colleagues. And we, obviously we don't lead on everything and we work collectively and collaboratively, but those are all pieces of how we will entice businesses to both incubate and to start here, but also from thought leadership, but how you get it from idea bench to commercialization is a larger piece that we work very closely with our chambers of commerce. We work very close with Associated Industries of Massachusetts. We think about our university systems and how we can make those investments like right across the street.
No, it's a really great answer, and it's a great question. And the two answers go hand in hand, because having the people ready to plug in on the workforce end is going to attract investment, whereas also investment is going to attract people looking for jobs and people that have the skills to be able to go and follow where that work is. And so in Western Massachusetts, we have so much potential for all of these items, for solar, for running the lines, for running transmissions lines, for upgrading houses, for upgrading public buildings, for as we build new buildings. The technology, as it changes, the number of workers needed is going to increase, and the jobs that they're doing is going to follow that. And Andrew, specifically, what we've been able to do with the advanced manufacturing program right here at GCC and at the tech school is something I always try to get replicated in other parts of Western Massachusetts, and could easily be replicated for sector by sector job opportunities that are presenting themselves. I know GCC, at least recently, was really looking into a healthcare training facility, but maybe this is a different place. And when we saw the slideshow at our committee level, GCC was on it as one of the schools that was interested in becoming one of these hubs. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of great opportunity, and it's just following through and making sure it happens.
We've been to GCC and we know they don't license electricians. They have to go down to.
So they should develop a program, and then we
Yes.
can help make it reality. But the school has to come up with that. Man,
Yeah,
we've
they,
had this discussion.
they have to go to Northampton for that. Night school.
Let's do it at GCC here in Greenfield. Would be awesome.
Just one other thing. When you mentioned light plants, you didn't mention that one of the sources for green energy listed under light plants is nuclear.
I don't think any of that's coming to Massachusetts, but we will certainly be on the lookout.
It's listed in the next generation law.
Please.
Well, no, I mean, just to your point, so the rep actually answered this earlier without realizing it, but a lot of that is at the federal level. So in our neck of the woods, it's Pilgrim was the nuclear power plant that is being decommissioned. I can't even talk about it. It's so fraught, but we do still have Seabrook. And if you look at your portfolio, it is in some municipal light plants, it is an existing. And when we were doing those procurements, you didn't buy in for 5, 10, 15 years, you bought in for the life of the plant, and you can't get out of those contracts. So nuclear is a piece that is part of our portfolios. It is non-carbon emitting, which is a positive, but it is, obviously it's nuclear, and it comes with its own risks and challenges and deep concerns. But FERC did just, I can't think of the right word, but it basically reauthorized Seabrook until I think might be till 2050 or 2045. So it is a part of our reality. But listen, we just put in place a plan to start to shift over towards renewables. Part of the larger next generation roadmap included legislation to get us up to as much as 40% of renewable energy and power for Massachusetts, which was a tremendous accelerating our renewable portfolio standard, even over what we did the session before. And we have Marjorie Decker to thank for that. But I will just say this, I am not discouraged by that question or that reality, I should say. You're always welcome questions. But I'm not discouraged by that reality because we are in a transition moment. I want you guys to think of it this way. We have set the goal. We are now putting all of the pieces in place to achieve it. And think of it this way, we have thrown the rudder hard to the port, and we are already starting to change, but it will take us time. it takes 5 years to get the offshore wind. It will take us time to build out our grid mod. And that's why we need to be doing it all together, because there is great urgency around this. And by the time we get there, let's hope we don't need to reauthorize that, and we will have a colleague in place on FERC who will start to not just allow these things to happen knee-jerk reaction. So I think that's a perfect place to stop and to say, we really can do this, but there's urgency. We need to act together, and we need to support each other. And I feel very buoyed personally by all of the really great spirit and initiative and energy and determination in this crowd to get that important work done, so we don't have to field questions like that anymore. So thank you all.
Thank you. And I don't know if I misunderstood the question, but just to be clear, nobody is proposing a nuclear power plant in Massachusetts. And if there ever were, we would fight that with every ounce of being available to us. And for Joan's benefit, the decommissioned Roe power plant is in my district, about half an hour west of here. And the decommissioned Vermont Yankee power plant is probably 15 miles up the road. So we're in the middle of two nuclear waste facilities, storage facilities here in Greenfield. But yeah, definitely hoping that nobody is looking to do anything in the future of coming anything else online. And thank you. I echo Joan's comments. First of all, thank you, Joan, for coming out here again, for making that trip all the way from just south of Boston. And thank you all for spending this afternoon with us and having the opportunity to chit chat. And for anyone that had individual questions, I know there were a couple of you, continue by email as always. Always happy to talk. And anyone that had not communicated with me by email, you're always welcome to do so. paul.mark@mahouse.gov. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank also a bunch of people that have been working on this, especially David Greenberg and Ferd Wolken, who are part of Franklin County Continuing the Political Revolution, and Nancy Hazard, who's part of Green and Greenfield. Kate Mason and I are part of the All Souls congregation, so Kate, you can take a bow. And Leslie Frazier from the Interfaith Council. She did the posters for us. Rabbi Andrea has been helping through Temple Israel. And Brent Pitcher and the Nolambika Project provided the sound system. Dan Tynan, who's also from the Unitarian Universalist Network, has set up the recording system so that we will have an upcoming YouTube. And the Mayor, Roxanne Wiedegardner, and Recreation Department provided us the space. And finally, but not least, Representative Paul Mark and Speaker Joan Meschino, who came all the way from Plymouth, and we thank you very much for your presence. And we are dedicated to cleaning up and being and dispersing soon. So if anybody can help clean up, that would be very helpful. Kate.
I wanted to make sure, am I back on? I wanted to make sure that everybody knows how much work Pam Kelly put into this effort, who was just speaking. So we were going to close with a song, and Rabbi Andrea is going to join me in that. The song is called "The Tide is Rising," and it's by Rabbi Shoshana Mira Friedman. And it's "The tide is rising, and so are we." And we do that 3 times, and this is where we are called to be. So it goes like this. The tide is rising, and so are we. And you're supposed to sing it with me. The tide is rising, and so are we. The 3rd time. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty. The task is mighty, and so are we, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The storm is raging. The storm is raging, and so are we. Let me hear you. The storm is raging, and so are we. The storm is raging, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready. The world is ready, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. Thank you all.
Yeah, this is the only other thing when we close out our. Thank you. From the east.